Alright everyone, let's talk about Han1 Green slash Data Vault. I'll be talking a bit about both this video. As a disclaimer, everything I say is my opinion based on my experience playing this deck. You're allowed to have your own opinion, that is totally fine. What I will be talking about in this video is kind of the general concept of Han Green. Not really, how to play, mulligans, lines, that sort of thing, but more focused on what do the decks look like, what kind of decks are we seeing around, and potentially how it might look going into set 5. So in terms of Han Green, we've really got a few different decks around. Most of the Han1 Green decks this set have been focused around space and pilots. So I've pulled together a few lists to kind of show you what I'm seeing in the current meta. First off, we have a very typical Han Green pilots list. This list was piloted by my friend Wartortle. He came 5th at the latest Melbourne PQ. He did really well with his deck. He and I worked quite closely together, chatting lines, strategies, sideboards. What we see here is a pretty typical space pilots list that we've been seeing since basically the start of set 4. We have the early game space units, Blue Leader, Falcons, Stolen Hauler. That then goes into the pilots like Chewbacca and Han Solo, even Poe Dameron, which is currently in the sideboard. Then we go into a very cut down casino. We've got 3 U-Wings, 2 Han Solo, 2 Enfys Nest, mainly toolbox options. This list has been very popular this set, and I can definitely see why. It's very fast and explosive. Get out a turn 1 3 cost unit, which is good value. Put a pilot on it, which makes it much harder to deal with, especially if it's a Chewie. Ramp up a bit, go space. You've got the blasters for added aggro. You've got the surprise strikes for added aggro. This kind of list has been quite popular this set. I initially was very hesitant to play this kind of list. I've been playing Han1 Green since set 1, and let me tell you, this list is quite different to how it used to be. Old Han1 Green used to be a lot more toolbox and value oriented, and then as soon as pilots came into this set and we kind of lost a bit of our toolbox thanks to DJ being suspended, this style of get out a ship, get out a pilot, and start going base has become quite popular. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of this deck? Obvious strength is that it gets really good aggressive value out of its units. Cards like Falcon from Spark Rebellion can come out and immediately start attacking base. Stolen Hauler is very hard to answer by most opponents turn 2. And then Blue Leader has the Ambush, which can get obvious value, taking out things like A-Wing and Restored Arc. The one problem I kind of have with this list is that it has a very linear play style, which is it's not a bad thing, but I find that this list is a little too easily interrupted. And if your first 1, 2, or 3 turns can kind of be dealt with and you're unable to establish that tempo or the aggro or any kind of board state, this list has a hard way of pulling back control just because it doesn't have much toolbox. But this list has been very popular set, has been very successful, and again, I applaud Wartortle for coming 5th at this PQ. I know he put in a lot of effort, very well done. This list has been seeing some recent changes into Data Vault, so I've pulled in another Data Vault list that we can take a look at. This list, you'll see, has a very similar core. It has the 3 cost space units, Blue Leader, Falcon, the new Rebel Falcon, and Stolen Hauler. It has pilots like Chewbacca, Han Solo, Poe Dameron. It has the U-Wing and a little bit of a casino with Enfys Nest, Han Solo, Luke Skywalker. Because this deck is running Data Vault, you get access to some extra cards. So as you can see in here, some extra cards include like the Luke Skywalker. We can run Han1 main board. There's a modded cohort main board. Got Confiscate, Salvage main board. Some of the problems that I had with the 30 health green base version are fixed in this list. Mainly the issues around the toolbox. I feel like that the 30 health list is a little too linear, and if it's interrupted, then it's kind of hard to come back from the loss of tempo. Whereas this list is able to run cards like Modded Cohort to help against the early game aggro. It's got Salvage and Han1 mainboard, which are able to help against control, and even the Bamboozle mainboard. Can't believe I didn't point that out immediately. Bamboozle mainboard really helps in the current meta, not only for maintaining control against aggro decks and lowering the tempo, but especially with some pilot leaders becoming very popular, such as the Boba and Vader pilot leaders. What I like about this deck is that it shares a similar strategy as the 30 health version. So if you've played the 30 health version, this list is going to be very familiar to you, but it does contain some of the toolbox cards that I love about Han Green, such as Bamboozle Salvage, Han1, Mother Cohort. This list was piloted by another friend of mine, Tristan, at the same PQ. He came fourth. He and I also kind of worked together talking about the list and discussing cards. He decided to move from the 30 health to the Data Vault literally the night before the PQ, just because he also wasn't quite feeling how the deck was functioning with it being so linear. And I recommended maybe he could try it Data Vault. He did and had great success with it. And after the event, he and I talked, and he attributed a lot of the success to having main board Salvage, Bamboozle, and Home One. Just some toolbox options so that as the game continues, you have mainboard answers to common decks such as Sabine, Veda Yellow, even control decks like Kira, Data. The last two lists were pilot space lists, but there is a third kind of list that I've been seeing people play, which is on the Han Data Vault. Let me bring that up now. This is a list created and piloted by Chris Barrow. He came fourth at his PQ in Mata 1. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And if you look at the deck, you will notice that it is a very different list. This is much more reminiscent of what we were playing back in set 1, 2, and 3. It doesn't have any of that pilot space aggro element to it. It is running, of course, Blue Leader and Millennium Falcon, as well as Chewbacca, just because those cards offer insane value. But this deck is a little bit slower. For instance, it's not running Surprise Strike because it's not nearly an aggro deck. It is looking mainly for the toolbox value kind of engine. So it's got cards like Modded Cohort and Ahsoka Tano to get the hand destruction to keep aggro decks at bay. It is also running the mainboard Bamboozle. It's running Cloud Rider instead of the common A-Wings and L3s, just because that helps a little more against ground aggro decks such as Sabine and even Kylo. It's running some old school cards that you might remember from set 2 and 3, such as the Marauder, which is a great space ambush unit. It hits a lot of things, as well as it's, when played, can get a lot of value by helping ramp up while building a board state and doing an ambush. It's got a much bigger casino, such having, 10 casino cards, I believe I'm looking at, between Enfys, Fennec, Han Solo, and Luke Skywalker, as well as mainboarding some of the other toolbox options, such as Home One for the mid-range control. It's got Change of Heart for control. This deck is, as you can see, quite different from the pilot space version, but Chris has seen a lot of success with this list, as well as seen a few others following this kind of list. Because this list is quite different to the Space Pilots list, it does have its own series of pros and cons. For instance, this list does exceptionally well against aggro and smaller mid-range decks, such as Cat Tarkentown, because it's able to get so much value from its units. A lot of its units will come down and impact the board state immediately. Got lots of ambush in the form of Cloud Rider, Modded Cohort, you've got the Syndicate Lackeys in sideboard, you've got Han Solo and Fennec. You've got cards that can interact with your opponent's hand, such as Spark Rebellion, Ahsoka Tano, and Kira. And the main premise of this deck isn't really to, go space, get a unit, get a pilot, and hit base. It's a little slower, more oriented around getting the value you can out of your units, getting 2-for-1s, controlling ball state a bit, and then once you reach the mid game, turning it into aggro, going to base, and using that tempo advantage you have to put a lot of damage onto base at one time. However, I personally find this deck a little harder to play against control because it doesn't have the speed as a space pilot deck. It has the Chewbacca, but it doesn't have the other pilots. It doesn't quite have the space element to it, which is very important against decks like Kira Daredevil because they are weaker in space. By playing a lot more ground heavy with the modded cohort and the Kira and the Ahsoka, it's very easy for opponents with very good ground control, such as Kira Daredevil, to come out with moles, reinforcement walkers, and slowly get back control of the board state from the early game. This deck just isn't quite explosive as the Space Pilots deck is, and thus it has a bit of trouble, or a bit more trouble, into Kira Daredevil. However, I wouldn't say this deck has no chance of beating control decks like Kyrodotavolt. I've spoken to the creator of this list, and he's mentioned that this deck doesn't have as much issues against control as some people might think. Now, I've identified 3 different styles of decks that I can see Han Green playing as, which is Space Pilots in both 30 health and Data Vault, and this more toolbox value engine built in Data Vault. Why didn't I find a deck like this in 30? We've been playing this style of deck in 30 health since set 1. Why am I not bringing it up here? My main opinion here is that this kind of toolbox deck in the current meta doesn't quite work in the 30 health base just because the meta is so varied and wide. We have, the best deck in set 4 only has a 13 or 14% market share, as well as decks you'll be facing, like the bigger mid-range decks, Ray Data Vault, Han2 Data Vault, Kira Data Vault, them having the extra 3 health, but also the extra cards to get answers and to have the toolbox, means that if you want to run a slower, more value-centric toolbox deck, I really think Data Vault's the only way to go. If you go too slow, then the 30 health is going to be limiting, as well as having 10 less cards means you won't have the same toolbox and the same breadth in your own deck as opponents will. Now, on to set 5. This is the deck that I'm currently considering taking to the World Championships in Las Vegas. So I've been paying quite a bit of attention to the cards in set 5 because that is the meta we'll be playing. And I've really identified 3 key cards that I think people will be playing in this deck, or at least heavily testing. I'm not saying these are the only cards people will be playing, but they are 3 very specific cards that stood out to me, and I just wanted to talk a bit about them. First is Kalaran Beck. This is a casino card for us. It is a 7-cost 7/7 Force Jedi Republic. But more importantly, it's when played, search the top 7 cards of your deck for a unit, reveal it, and play it. It costs 3 less. This is kind of a mix between what a Ewing is and what a Han1 is. Ewing obviously says look at the top 10 cards, and you may play cards where the cost is equal to 7 or less in value. Han1 says when played, you may play a heroic unit from your graveyard, it costs 3 less. What this allows you to do, Clarion Beck, what it allows you to do is look through the top 7 cards of your deck and not be so limited to only playing something that costs 3 or less, but it allows you to play something and it costs 3 less. This is perfectly fine in the mid game. You bring out with a Ewing, you get a Falcon or a Blue Leader, something along those lines, you get value. But it becomes quite valuable in the late game where you've got 9, 10, 11, 12 resources, and you could potentially play Clarion Beck. And off the top, you get a Han Solo, possibly even a Luke. You could get Han1. This allows you a lot of versatility, not only in the mid game, but in the late game. And also, any card where you can play one card and you get multiple units out of it always is good in Han Solo because it allows us to get multiple units on the board and protect ourselves more from control cards like Merciless Contest and Power of the Dark Side. These kind of cards are very important in our control matchups, which is why you see some people in the sideboards playing cards like Tantive, having Poe Dameron and Ewing's Han1s, just because these are cards where you can play one thing and get multiple units and helps protect against some common control cards. Now, on to the next great Han Green card that's coming in next set is Qui-Gon Jinn. This is another casino card, being a 7-cost, and offers a lot of value. So it's a 7-cost 7/5 Force Jedi Republic with Ambush, and when defeated, you may choose a non-leader ground unit. Its owner puts it on top or bottom of their deck. Being a 7-cost, obviously it piqued our interest for Han Green because any kind of 7 costs we have to take a look at because it can come off Ewing and be played when Han deploys. The 7 attack and ambush is very important because up until now, most of our ambush, aside from Fennec, has had 6 attack, or even our Luke Skywalker, the blue Luke Skywalker, does -6, -6. This is a great value option to get that 7 attack, which is quite important against certain leaders and cards. Just that 1 extra attack adds a lot of value. As well as the brilliant when defeated, you may choose a non-leader ground unit. Its owner puts on top or bottom of the deck. This is very similar to a Waylay built onto the unit. However, it puts it on top or bottom of the deck, which means that the opponent won't have access to it that turn unless they draw the card. However, it is limited more to ground units, so it can't hit cards like Avenger or Devastator or Relentless. However, I still think this is a great card that we should be testing in Han Green coming into set 5, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm keeping it in my list, but it is a great toolbox option, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of Han Green players running this. Now, if we're mentioning Qui-Gon Jinn, we obviously have to mention Qui-Gon Jinn's Aether Sprite. It's a space unit, it's a 5 cost 3/6 Jedi Republic vehicle fighter, and it says, on attack, the next time you use a when played ability this phase, you may use that ability again. I believe this is maybe the highest ceiling card that we're getting from next set. Being able to trigger when played abilities twice is a huge value for our deck. We have lots of cards that have great when played abilities, such as Han1 or Kalaran, both being able to, when played, and get 2 units onto the board, which is a 3-for-1. We've got Luke Skywalker coming in, potentially doing -6 and then -6 again, able to kill bigger units that are up to 12 health, or hitting 2 units, which is great removal. We have cards like Kira, which can come in. You can look at your opponent's hand and name 2 different cards and turn off a lot of your opponent's plays. We also, depending on the list you're running, have cards like Marauder, which could get a double ramp, or Ahsoka, which will discard 2 of your opponent's cards, and possibly exhaust 2 of your opponent's units. I believe this card could offer huge value in the deck. We have lots of great when played abilities. The only thing is the on attack. This unit does have to swing, which kind of puts a bit of a limit on how we're able to play this card, as it's probably going to have to be the first card we attack with in the turn, which can sometimes throw off sequencing. However, it is being a 3/6, it gets under both Fell the Dragon and Takedown, which means it's a little bit harder to remove. And as I said, I believe this card could offer heaps of value to our deck, so I'm definitely looking forward to testing it and seeing how it plays. And with that, that brings us to the end of my rambling video. Because I'm potentially taking this deck to the Galactic Championships in Vegas, I've been thinking about this deck a lot and testing different lists, and I just wanted to pull together some of my opinions and share what I've been thinking about this deck with people, and also the different kind of builds that you can play with this. If you have any comments, questions, or differing opinions, please put them in the comment section below. Otherwise, I will see you next time.